I'm good.
Good. All right, so it's 6:32, a near record early to have all five of us here. This is the Fiber Broadband Completion Task Force, April 7th, 2022 meeting. It's 6:30 p.m. I'm Mark Howell, the chairperson for this task force, and I'm going to do a quick roll call. Gordon Brockway.
Here.
Scott Hopkinson.
Can you hear me? I'm here.
Yes.
Good.
I can hear you. David Hessel.
Here.
Gail Hire.
Here.
Great. Well, welcome everyone. We're approaching the home stretch here. I'll note that this meeting is being recorded, and I'll make our traditional request for a volunteer clerk. If we have one.
I did it last week. Does someone else want to try?
I thought I did it last week.
That was 2 weeks ago. How time flies, David.
Yeah, I still haven't gotten it started.
It's
I still
okay.
owe you.
All right. So,
Listen, I'm reticent to volunteer because I'm behind in my writing, but if
yes.
you want, I will do it. I will probably try and get it done as we talk because I don't have a lot to say during the meeting today.
Okay.
Honestly, I think that most of the record of this meeting is going to end up in the form of the document itself. So
Yes, similar to last week.
Yeah, I found that was true because I went through the YouTube of what I just that's fine. If you want, again, I'll do it.
Okay, thank you, Scott. And I noticed that you did distribute February 24th, just a short time ago. So we'll probably plan to review those next time around.
That would be better. Yeah.
I know I haven't had a chance to open them and look at them.
Yeah, no, that I just wanted to, maybe it was more to let you know that I'm making progress anyway.
Thank you. Okay, so let's go with that.
the next meeting is a hearing, right?
Our next meeting actually is the light board meeting, which is next Wednesday morning at 7:30. It'd be great if you guys can be there. We'll have a discussion about the status of our recommendations from the draft. So the goals for tonight are to agree on the content of the first public draft of our report, building off of what draft 3 that was just distributed, that's been built and distributed to the task force, and we're the document that we're going to be reviewing as we go along tonight. And then we'll have a public hearing. No, I'm sorry. We're going to have a forum. It's not a hearing, because it's basically an opportunity for people to have looked at that draft, ask us questions and give us comments on that draft of the report on next Thursday night. That's in person at the townhouse hearing room. It's scheduled for 7 p.m. I'm asking the task force to be prepared to convene by, say, 6:45. So we could do a little housekeeping. It is a meeting after all. So if we want to do some housekeeping, that would be great. Otherwise, our goal there will be to further discuss the draft report, both with the public and amongst ourselves, on the way to the actual publication of the report by the end of the month.
Marcus, that 7:30 meeting on Zoom?
7:30 a.m. the light board does meet via Zoom. The light board's not meeting in person at all yet, are they?
Not yet.
Will we get an invite or the Zoom on that?
Oh, I can forward the agenda to you.
Thank you.
It'll also be on the town calendar, and the agenda is posted. I believe we get 20 minutes during that meeting, according to the communication I've already had with Wendy Ravelli. Okay, so that's just a quick look ahead at future meetings.
Can I just ask a couple of quick questions here? So the meeting, the light board meeting on 7:30 a.m. next, whatever the date is.
Wednesday, April 13th.
Okay, and will we present a draft of the whole report, or will we present a PowerPoint that summarizes the key points of it?
I intend to summarize the points for, yeah, in a PowerPoint or some sort, so that we will have just the light board will receive the public draft of the report, and just, I know we're almost ahead of ourselves here, but the goal that I have is by the end of this weekend, I will have the report both in a format for distribution, and hopefully maybe even Jason can help me here, or someone from the PIO's office, have it posted on our task force webpage for anybody who wants to download and read it. So that version, which will probably be something like draft 4 or 5, depending on whether we get to do daily versions in the next couple of days, will be what we'll be asking for comments on specifically and referencing.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay. So we're going to come right back to that topic in a split second. Is everybody, I know Gordon did distribute the minutes from last week on the 31st. Do people get a chance to read them, and are you comfortable acting on those minutes tonight?
I did, and they're pretty short, so it might not take long to go through.
Yeah, I just had one comment. Did you have any comments, Gail?
I had a couple.
Okay.
Did you take roll call? I'm sorry, Mark.
Yes, I did.
Okay, thank you.
Right before you volunteered.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So if other folks want to go through it, it might be helpful for someone to share, and then I can just
Sure.
point out a couple places.
Unless Gordon, you want to do it?
Here, why don't I do it, because I actually have a updated copy of it, which you may or may not have noticed I sent, where I changed from first names to formal names.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the one I looked at. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm trying to share my screen. Yeah, here it is. Can you see minutes for March 31?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so my first comment was just under subheading meetings, scheduled public forum instead of hearing.
Yeah.
That was my first comment.
Okay. Hearing set for forum. Thank you. We certainly spoke about that enough.
Yeah.
So I don't know why I didn't jot it down at the time.
Yeah, you delved into it a little bit later, but no
Okay.
reason to say the wrong thing.
In fairness, I was using the inaccurate term too. So.
And then my next comment is on page 2. Right before the ABCD, where it said Ms. Heyer suggested moving state of fiber to last section. I don't recall saying that, so I don't know, it's not a huge deal, but anyway, I don't know if you want to take that out, or
Yeah, sure.
it's on page 2, so further the way down.
Yeah, and I may have
Yeah.
misunderstood what you were talking about.
Yeah, I know we're talking about organization.
Mhm.
Anyway, and then there was something a little bit slightly more substantive on page 3. Mr. Hopkinson explained that buried fiber costs of 1.5, so it's $1.50.
Yeah, I think
Right.
the dollar sign would be useful there.
It's the top of page,
What
Yeah.
page is it?
top of page 3.
Third
Okay,
line.
right, of course. Yeah, you want a dollar sign there.
1.50, just so you know. It's
Oh,
people aren't
yeah, zero
wondering,
two.
is that what you
Yeah.
meant?
Yeah.
And then finally, under metrics, it's Carlin, Karlen, and then I just threw her last name in there, Reed. And I know I don't want to delve too much about the payment in lieu of franchises. We've talked about that enough, but I did make the point that this is a relatively new outlay, if that's the right term, from broadband, and it could be easier to change because it just started. So I thought that was kind of, I don't know.
Okay, who said that?
notable. I said that. Yeah, I said Ms.
Okay.
Heyer pointed out that it is a relatively new outlay from broadband and could be easier to change because it just started, something to that effect. It's not like we're trying to change something that's been around for a long time.
Mhm.
So that's all I had.
And the only other, I think it's in the public comments area. When,
Carlin
again,
again.
yeah, Carlin again, and she noted that it should be multiplied by 12, and we had done the calculation, and it's the correct, we did the calculation kind of in real time there, and the correct amount was
Probably
$9,598.80.
Did I do that right?
80 cents. Yeah. Okay. So just based on that was looking at the draft. So that was just a correction to a part of the report. Okay. Great. Anybody else have any further? Okay.
Get rid of that extraneous page.
Yeah.
Huh. Oh, well. Doesn't want to get rid of that last page. Anyway, I shouldn't be wasting committee
Okay.
time on that, but
There.
killed it. All right, so so I'll rename this as
Great.
approved.
Yeah, I'll move to approve the minutes as modified during tonight's meeting.
Thank you, Gail. And do I hear a second?
A second.
Thank you, David. And any further discussion? Okay, I'll take a roll call vote in favor of approving the minutes of March 31st. Gordon Broccoli,
Aye.
Scott Hopkinson,
Aye.
David Hessel,
Aye.
Gail Heyer,
Aye.
myself, Mark Howell, aye. Thank you very much.
Can I just CC the person in the townhouse that handles this stuff?
Sure. It's just meetings at concordma.gov.
There, it's in my history.
Great. Yeah, okay. So just, we've already covering these, but they are in the agenda. We just discussed the fact that the plan is to post the draft task force report by April 11th and distribute to the light board and the select board ahead of our public meeting. We will provide and have an opportunity to talk about the content of the draft for 20 minutes at the light board meeting on Wednesday, April 13th, as discussed. This is in the chair's report section. Again, our public forum is scheduled for 7 p.m. In the townhouse hearing room, at which point we'll probably use basically the same, maybe slightly expanded version of the report. I would take volunteers if there's anybody who's interested in presenting or discussing specific sections of the report in either of these contexts, I'd be more than happy to share that opportunity so people don't have to listen to me drone on completely, but so volunteer offline if you want, or if you want a piece of that. And then finally, we did briefly discuss this.
Oh, actually, could I just, I'm happy with you speaking or presenting, Mark, unless you need the help. And then also, I just wanted, I think you were just saying that'd be in the light board meeting too, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I
that's fine by me.
We're going to try and go like 10 minutes and put up the things that we want them to act on. So the light board is likely to be a little bit of a subset of what we might actually do in a public meeting.
Okay.
Hear that?
Are you going to have a set of view graphs or something?
Yes.
That's
And
what I asked him.
yeah, we'll talk about that, but I think it may look something like what's in the table of contents of our document, with a little bit of explanation on that. But I think the idea is to cover the effort, say what's in the report, say what the key recommendations are, as is generally outlined in the executive summary, and then take input. Just lastly, before we dive back into that, which is the subject, the primary purpose of this meeting tonight, we had talked about meeting as a follow-up to that public input 2 more times on the 21st and on the 28th, both 6:30, probably in this format, so that we can turn that first public draft into a final version of the report based on the comments and any further work that we might choose to do. So are those 2 time slots good for everybody?
Would you say those dates again, Mark, please?
They're Thursday nights, the 21st and the 20th. at
April
6:30.
21st, April 28th, 6:30 via Zoom, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm optimistic that we're largely done at that point, except for any further discussion that we might want to schedule. So, for example, with any other committees or groups that are interested in hearing more about this.
Those dates work for me.
Great.
And so that would be at 6:30, you think?
Yeah, it'll be the same schedule that we've been on, basically. So we're really talking about meeting the next 3 Thursday evenings from here. Okay, good.
Mark, did your buzzer go off?
I did. Can I have 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Has everyone had a chance to read Mark's draft executive summary?
Yep.
Too busy writing. I'm sorry. I actually made some comments to the previous one, which I can plug out and plug into the new version if they didn't get added already. But mostly I've been working on my section, so I am woefully behind, and I'm going to have to just take some time off from work and finish it tomorrow because we're running out of time, basically.
I read it, and I mean, I made one comment, but there's another comment I have, which I'll wait till Mark gets back. It's minor.
Yeah.
And this was mailed around yesterday, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so.
Thank you so much. Okay, the next item that I put on the agenda was a discussion, potentially vote and recommendation for removal or continuance of the payment in lieu of franchise. And I had promised you guys a write-up, which took a little bit of a backseat this week to working on the report. So I'm going to share my screen to show you what I think the write-up is. And this is sort of in support of the substance of what's in the executive summary. So let me just put this up. And we have discussed this a number of times before. So you know, it recognizes the amounts of the payment in lieu of franchise for the last 2 budget cycles. And last year was the first time, 2021, $18,634 and increasing to $21,923 in this one. This table is lifted directly from the FY23 enterprise budget reports, and it highlights sort of the operating revenue and expenditures of each of the funds, and telecom is the second line, and Minuteman Media Network is the bottom line. And so my observations here is Minuteman Media Network doesn't need these funds to operate at this time, because they would have assuming the $21,000, they would have a net operating income of $19,000. So essentially the $21,000 from broadband is dropping directly to their bottom line in their budget, except for $2,000. Elsewhere in the report, in the budget book, it states that Minuteman Media Network has a fund balance of $1.4 million, or basically more than 3 times their operating expenses. So they could operate with 0 income for 3 years and not run out of money. The telecom fund, by contrast, has operating expenses of $1.457 million. Is my pointer showing up on the screen, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
A little hard to see, yeah, there.
Yeah. And has a fund balance of about $553,000 at the end of this year, $440,000 going into this year, which is about three months or about 4 months worth of operating expenses. So the two funds are vastly different positions in terms of their capital stability, their financial stability. So just pointing that out. So I'm suggesting that we recommend that the pilot be suspended for now. The telecommunications capital program for fiber expansion could use this money, and telecommunications doesn't have much of a fund balance compared to other enterprise funds, and MMN doesn't need the money. I think we should further recommend that the select board and finance committee weigh in on how appropriate it is to cross subsidize MMN in this way. I'm not saying never or don't go back to it. I'm just saying that given those facts, it's hard for me to responsibly recommend that we be setting aside money for capital and expansion of the network, while also sort of draining the operating income. And you can see that the impact of it shows up right here. The operating income of $160,000 becomes a net income of $119,000. And a lot of that is, half of that amount is this $21,000 payment difference there.
Yeah, how big would, in fact, if I mean, one of the fears is that Comcast could go away. And, you know, it's like, maybe imagine that it goes away because of the inroads that telecom is made in its business,
Mhm.
how much would the telecom business have to grow in order to sustain what Comcast is paying? So like right now, we're clearing 160,000. Comcast is kicking in, what, 400,000 or so? So it's like we'd have to grow like 3 times over
Yeah, I mean, it's,
operating income in order to take over Comcast's role.
mhm.
And in the meantime, Comcast is selling services that are much more valuable with a huge cable bundle. And I mean, so Mike, what's your cable bill? Mine's pretty big.
Mine's
So-
0.
Yeah,
Bucks.
so's mine, but it used to be big. And what
Yeah.
about, I mean, is it even possible for Concord to somehow like get a tax from other internet service providers, like, you
Mm.
know, Starlink or something like that, you know? I mean, 'cause if you
Yeah.
went with the rationale, I kind of think that's not possible. Does anyone know?
It is, it would not be possible. You know, what I think you're pointing to, and I completely agree with this, is Starlink, for example, is very comparable to the services that Concord Light Broadband is providing. It's basically bits to the internet. And yet, you know, this is a completely voluntary payment. It's not like anybody who's providing internet service in Concord has to pay this. This is just because we can.
Yeah, and I did
It's,
hear,
wait a minute, it's volunteer, just to be clear, it's volunteer from our perspective. It's not currently voluntary from the Comcast
Right.
perspective.
Comcast entered into a contract that obligates them to pay that, and they're as we all know and have talked about many times, are about to negotiate or renegotiate that contract, and nobody knows the outcome of that at this
That's
stage.
right. As a matter of fact, I was just in the meeting this afternoon on that subject. So
Was there anything that you
no,
might-
we're actually working with the town to put on an RFQ for a firm to help us. You know, this is standard fare because this is a 10-year contract. The renewal is in 2024 when the contract would actually be signed. The normal process is we find someone outside who's skilled in the art of negotiation or whatever provider it is. And we hire that, the town hires them as a consulting firm at a very reasonable amount. I've asked about the specifics relative to the value. So the contract, by the way, just to put it in perspective, because this was in the meeting notes, generally speaking, the contract with Comcast, because it covers 10 years, is worth about $3.5 million. So that's something we have, we want make sure that we negotiate that and have the right framework. And we actually discussed in the meeting today, trying to make sure that we have wording in that the new version of that agreement should Comcast, one of the things I'm proponent of based on the pay work and all this is that we might put some words in there. So should they change the transmission media, that the fee would still be due, I think there's some wording of that nature that's rather broad, that as long as the intent of delivering, their franchise, we want to try and capture that somehow. That's my goal. I don't know if it can be possible or not. There's a lot of
Yeah, I was involved somewhat in the 2014 renegotiation of the last renewal of this. And of course, at that time, there was even some discussion about the possibility that these fees might decline. History actually shows us that they haven't.
right.
And again, so I mean, I recognize the concern. I just think that at this stage of the game, and remember our mission here is the Fiber Completion Task Force is to focus on available resources for completing fiber. And I'm looking at this, and I'm suggesting that our task force position is that this would be better. These funds would be better spent on that goal, because I can't see how they ever get replaced or come back to telecom. So it's the one source of revenue of resource that telecom has to complete the fiber network, and we're giving it away. And
Yeah, well, yeah,
think that makes sense.
there are some other things that we'll discuss. And again, this is going into my section and I apologize. I talked briefly about this a meeting or so ago, and I'd asked to get a few minutes to talk about some of the things I'd learned in talking to the Washington State folks. And that's maybe that, I don't know when would be a good time, but I'll make that request again. I would like to make a couple comments that will impact this financial portion of this that are potentially to the good, by the way, more significant than the difference in this payment in lieu of franchise fee. So
Yeah, so
I guess I wanted to say something, Mark. I mean, I have heard from folks, I think, Carlin and Terry last time, and a member of the public, I think Frank Breen, seemed to think that this is something that Frank had said, if Comcast is paying for it, Comcast customers are paying for it, but everybody benefits, then, other people should be paying for it too. And so it kind of seems like it should just be somehow come out of the town. I don't know if general fund is the right word, but, be supported by the town broadly and not necessarily, specific to broadband. So that would be my,
right.
so wait a minute,
addition to this.
what scale? Maybe I could understand what you said. So you say come out of the general fund to pay?
Well, I mean, if Minuteman Network needs funds, they should come from the town as a whole and not come just from the broadband enterprise.
I think that's particularly true if we lose the Comcast funding.
Right.
I don't think anybody would propose moving off of the Comcast funding to imposing it onto taxpayers generally, so long as we have the Comcast funding.
Yeah, and I would, I think there's at least, I guess 3 of us, if I count myself, Scott and Gail, who are currently not Comcast customers and are Concord Broadband customers, and therefore we're not contributing to the Comcast, payment, and would be in this sense. And so I could be had on this subject, which is one of the reasons why, and the way I worded it in the executive summary, and when we start reviewing the document, we'll come back to that. I do think that what's really important about this is that the rationale for doing it or not doing it sees the light of day and is endorsed by appropriate citizen groups, so that we all know why we're doing it, how we're doing it, if we're going to do it. So, under that, in the scenario you listed, Gordon, Comcast stops paying a franchise fee. I don't see why 1,500 Concordians should have to make up for all of that. So maybe the right answer is move it into the general fund and just recognize it as a function of municipal government, and I'd be perfectly okay. I'm fine with paying something for this. I believe that what MMN does is extremely important and needs to be funded. I'm just making a purely financial argument here on behalf of telecom.
Yeah.
I'd even broaden it from financial to something a little broader, which is what's the mission of the broadband service? Right. And it should be to benefit subscribers and to provide low-cost service. And when you start putting these adders on it, that makes the service less cost-effective.
Yeah, there is. I didn't mention it, but I do also think there's a little bit of double dipping going on here, in the sense that the light plan already pays a payment in lieu of taxes, which is different, and that's based on its plant value. So
isn't that related to property tax type things?
Right.
Effectively, yeah. The argument would be that if we sold the light plant's assets to Eversource, then we'd be collecting property tax.
And my
Oh, okay.
observation is that the fiber network and the telecom assets are part of those assets, and therefore being included in the calculation for the payment in lieu of taxes. So telecom operations is already contributing something to the payment in lieu of taxes that the light plant's already doing
Oh,
based
that's
on that. And
very
then,
good point.
and then now this additional payment is based on revenue. So I would say that, you know, from a telecom fund perspective, they're possibly paying twice.
Allow me to give you a great analogy, Mark. This is like someone who's renting an apartment being asked to pay voluntarily property taxes.
Yeah, something like that.
Because
When
in
it's not
fact,
in their lease.
right, no, in fact, we are tenants
sometimes is.
from the light plant who's paying their payment in lieu of taxes for property.
Right.
We just rent, keyword, their excess dark fiber to run the broadband business.
Yeah.
And you know, that's, so, I mean, if you wanted to go down that path, that's a very strong argument, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there, you know, this is on the line, and, you know, I'm happy to, I don't think we have a clear sense of it, but I do think that it makes sense to at least surface that this is going on, that it's potentially adversely impacting the resources available for fiber construction, and that it's a decision that's been made, and we could decide to keep it there.
I think that the most important takeaway from this is, aside from these details, which are important too, but that, like, it's like the point I just made a second ago. Look, this is standing in the way of building out the service, and not everybody is being served right now. And I'd even connect it to, I don't know if we can bring it to the public domain, but, you know, in an earlier conversation, we were saying, hey, one of these streets is going to get paved. Couldn't we lay down fiber? That's a great opportunity. We asked people about it. We had conversations with the light plant and Public Works, and the word comes back, we don't have the money for that.
Yeah.
Right. So it's real. It's a real impediment to providing the service to everybody that wants it.
And just making up a number, suppose that the cost of doing that actually was, you know, $21,923. What
Yeah.
would we rather do?
Yeah. And I'd throw in Scott's Ditch Witch thing too. That's
Okay.
just an example of how they can
Yeah.
maybe do this stuff more inexpensively.
Okay, so that I said it was discussion and possible vote, and I'm kind of meant it because I don't feel like it's exactly necessary for us to take a hard position on it, but I did think that the surfacing the background was worthwhile as we look at the report in more detail. So the next item on our agenda is to continue discussion of the draft report and sections, and I'm prepared to bring that up for us to begin to look at if we're ready to move to there. And this topic will come up a little bit as we look at the executive summary section anyway. So are you guys ready to move on, or does somebody feel strongly about what's being presented in a way that they want to make a motion for or against that? Don't let me railroad it.
I don't want to make a motion, but I'm wondering if I could grab a couple minutes just to relate some information that I've learned that's going to impacting the finance piece of this and
Okay.
broader piece here. So what I want to report out on is an effort that I took on myself to reach out to the state of Washington's organization that does broadband, and I've shared some information with them in the past. I will be putting some notes into a proposed appendix to this report, and I will send you folks this, and I apologize you haven't had it before now. This only took place about a week ago, but there were a couple major findings that came away from that discussion. So when I made this request for public information for some of their financial information, the response I got back was they scheduled a meeting, which in turn, who showed up was their leading financial person, the head of their broadband business, one of their engineers, and a public information officer. This is all in Washington State. What I learned that was most notable about all this was the part I'd already shared about what the exact specification of both the fiber and the Ditch Witch engine they're using and what their cost model for that is, which is quite low. $200 for the first 100 feet and $150 after that. But the one that was actually much more dramatic, which has taken me some time to assimilate into the financial aspect of this, is it's become very apparent that other organizations take a very different view of the capital equipment portion. That's the last, pick a number, 200 feet, mile, whatever, in terms of how long they amortize that. And we got a little clue about it when I mentioned it the other day, when I said that they do things over a 12-year period. So for example, when they do an install, they do a $25 fee per month that lasts 12 years, and that lives. And what goes hand in hand with that is they, from a financial perspective, they treat the installation as having a much longer life. And so they are, with their financial depth, as Concord has, we have a great ability to borrow money at a very favorable rate. They were able to sort of calculate that net present value of that install. Their average install cost, because they're a rural area, is on the order of $4,000, almost 2.5 times what ours is. But because they have this longer view of the amortization of that capital investment, they can take on that, and they're actually doing roughly 600 installs per month, and they have a 2-year backlog. I mean, this is the kind of, now they do have some benefits we don't have. They're the only game in town. There's no competitors for them. But I did think some of the attributes of this conversation and how they handle it from a financial perspective were quite interesting. And I just wanted to let you guys know that that's some of that stuff's going to be factored into the portion of the report that I'm struggling to get done, which I will, like I said, I'll just take some time off tomorrow to do it.
And how long do they amortize what's the assumed useful life of the
I believe it's 20 years.
20 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
And how would you describe their setting? Urban, rural?
Rural. And so, it's quite a distance between the properties. They put up poles sometimes, so they don't have they have two things that are very different from us. One is they don't have an underground mandate, so they can put up poles if they want. And they usually, it sounds like what they do is a hybrid solution where they'll put poles up and then the vibratory plow, they do that a lot. And so that was kind of interesting to see how they attack that. They also very much have the notion of what we call, and I pointed out to you, this is something that Google did when they were doing their fiber work, which is they have these, what they call fiber hoods, and they actually get volunteer individuals within the community for each of these small areas to get them organized. They help them out, and they won't go into a particular area until they get a 70%, a certain percentage of those people willing to sign up for the fiber. So they won't go into a particular area until they've got a take rate of above a certain level. They're reporting take rates in the 70% level. Now, again, there's a different situation there because they are the only game in town. Neither Comcast nor Fios will go into these rural areas where they're serving. So they really have a different advantage in that regard. They also set up their business model very different, where they provide the infrastructure and then use independent ISPs to manage them and service them. So go ahead with your question.
Just only their defined population base?
I don't have it in front of me. I'll have to go back to my notes.
Okay.
So what Scott said at the end there is important. There are quite a few, particularly, it seems to be more popular out west, projects where they create what is often referred to as an open access network. Effectively, a single provider of a fiber network provides access to other value-added service providers. So they can have multiple internet service providers operating over the same fiber network with one common fiber network operator. And it's an interesting model because it creates this competition by allowing more than one potential provider to use the exact same strand of fiber, thereby avoiding the sort of duplicative construction costs of building more than one fiber network in any particular area.
Yeah, I mean, some of these things some of these concepts may not even be possible with us now unless we made a fairly healthy pivot from the way
Yeah.
that we do the business now. But I did think it was worth interesting, and I do think there's to step back to 10,000 feet. One of my proposed recommendations for this will be that either whoever's running this broadband business should make an activity of having these explorations and looking at these other models and seeing how they might fit relative to our broadband business. And the folks that I spoke with actually gave me a recommendation of another community that sounded, we were able to share enough information. They actually said, you should go talk to these folks. That it's much closer to what you guys are doing. And so anyway, but I just wanted to give you a quick overview of that. I know it's late in the whole game here, but like I said, I'll try and make sure that the financial piece of it, it's not going to be pivoted based on that, but it will try and show that, a couple of these knobs that we can twist, particularly about the capitalization aspect, may give us an opportunity to do something much different. And the key one that I took off from was their ability to go after endpoints where the cost of install was substantially higher. To me, that really resonated with the problem we're trying to solve, which is.
But Scott, just so I understand, the $25 a month, that's for all installs, or would it depend on the cost of the install?
No,
And-
it goes across all, I believe, except for so there's a difference between these fiber hoods and others. So I didn't get that part clear. I have to do a little research, which I can do with the information they gave me, because they gave me a bunch of links to their details in their website, including their financials. So I was going to, part of my homework there is finish up is to kind of compare and contrast what we're doing with how they're taking it.
Because if I did my math right, that's $7,500.
Right.
That's a lot of money. That's
Yeah.
a lot of money.
$25 a month for 12 years.
Yep.
Isn't that $3,600?
Yeah, I think it's 3,600.
Oh, okay. I probably got the. It was
144 payments of $25.
Yep, it's 3,600. Yeah.
Okay, still a lot of money, but they'll actually make it to the house. We don't do that. The homeowner has to do that.
Actually, they do not. There's another aspect of this thing which was quite mind-blowing to me, because of the model which I've discussed and Mark talked about a little more, that they use a commercial ISP. Their whole activity is outside of the house only. So the ONT, and they're in a weather environment that's much more forgiving than ours. So they can mount that ONT, the optical network terminal, outside the house as opposed to inside. And if you used to have or still have a conventional phone, that the demarc point for the phone system was always on the outside, a little plastic box, and they had some protection around it and so forth. Even my when I had DSL, that was outside the house. So their model was to only do things outside of the house. And here's the one that caught me completely by surprise. Because of the nature of how they're doing this, they merge their finances with their utility. It's not run separately, which was a big surprise to me as well. So they look at this as all in part and parcel to their utility business. They don't keep separate, as we keep separate financials for the light plant and the broadband business. They do not do that. They make accounting adjustments that justify that, but they don't do it. They don't keep a separate record, which I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah, that's partially in place. I mean, that is in place because of the regulatory environment and the caps on the returns that Massachusetts have. The outside ONT solution is something that was done, Leverett, Massachusetts, which is a rural community north of Amherst. Actually was very similar in conditions. They had no other providers and they built their own And they actually got Holyoke Electric and Gas to operate it for them, along with another system operator. So they contracted out everything, and they created a municipal light plant just to do this. And they're the same people that wrote up the history of Concord Broadband from the Burke and Klein Center actually looked at that as well. And so, there are many different ways to do this. There's technically no actual reason why our system couldn't actually support another provider using the fiber to do it. The same technology that allows us to provide the virtual private networks today is available to do that, and there are other ways of configuring it to do the same thing. And that's all important capabilities in my mind. That all adds up to the real value of continuing to just construct the fiber, because once you have the fiber, all these other business models and operating modes become potentially available if you finish the fiber build. And so, as we think about what the document actually says, certainly as I've been sort of honing the message myself, I do hope you guys all got a chance to read the executive summary. I've increasingly begun to think that the real message here is we've done well so far. We should finish the network in order to get those benefits, some of which don't really accrue until you get to, more than 70 to 80% of available premises have access, or may not accrue, would be the way I would look at it. Did you want to say more about that investigation, Scott?
No, that's sufficient. I just had another thought, Mark, before we leave this, is I wonder what the response from Comcast would be if we were at that 80% point and we went to them and say, hey, stop dealing with all that coax cable on your and we'll deliver your services here, and let's have a conversation about that. I wonder if that either would be a good idea, or if it's even a possibility, or if it makes sense. I haven't even tried to
or vice versa.
Well, I'm not saying this is exactly to that point, but when there's something called I believe it was called INET, which was often included in franchise agreements in the past. It's an obligation for franchisees to connect municipal buildings and schools. So that's in libraries. And that was standard terms in these cable operator agreements for years and years. And it's the reason that, all the schools and all the municipal buildings have access to Comcast, and they basically get the television service for free. In the 2014 renewal, Comcast, maintaining that was somewhat costly to them, and it was becoming obsolete because it was just basic cable service, and nobody really found it to be that much of a benefit. So they negotiated and paid for and sort of bought their way out of that. In the rationale that we had at the time was that we had already managed to connect everything to the fiber network, and using those funds, we were able to connect the few places that weren't. So we let them off the hook for their INET responsibilities, because we were able to do all of that with and the money was more worth it. So, those kinds of sort of step downs from what their previous responsibilities were in the light of alternatives, it is something that has come up in previous negotiations, is my point.
Interesting.
Okay, let's dive into the document. So I'm gonna share here. And you guys give me feedback right away on how legible it is, because this is going to be up for a lot of the meeting. Do I need to make it bigger?
Could zoom in within Word, that would be nice.
Yeah, I'll just let's.
Great.
That's good. Perfect.
Okay.
That'd be
So this is probably the big well, there are a lot of changes, I suppose, but the abstract section has a table of contents now added. And that will be our guide to the document from here on. So this section outline has been replaced. The preface was reworked. I think Gail reworked the preface, didn't you, Gail? Or was that largely unchanged from last week? I can't remember. We'll see it in a minute. The focus area definitions was just a document that we used in September. The executive summary I did receive quite a bit of attention this week, so I appreciate feedback on that. The state of fiber section was also updated as of yesterday. Scott, I took the liberty of putting some stuff in section 6, but
I saw, and that's fine.
use or replace whatever we need to.
I'm going to hand you section 6 as a standalone document that you can copy paste in there.
Distribute it to everybody, and we'll
Okay.
start
Fair enough.
going for that. Gordon worked on the growth section, and he and I discussed that for some time. Recommendations, it was mostly formatting. I'm realizing that I think last week I had put David's HOA section under, sort of inserted in the middle of it. I don't believe it's there anymore. I moved it into what I called 8.2. The ARPA request is 8.1. So these sections there. We pulled out the members. I have this was in here to remind each of you. That's an opportunity for a small bio about sort of who you are and why you're on the task force. So please take a look at that and update your own bio. I reordered it from the way Gordon did it, just because I've been doing things like roll calls and everything alphabetically by last name throughout this whole time, just because I feel like that's, if you've noticed, there's an order. So I did that again and reordered it the same way. And finally, there's an opportunity, and Scott, I know you mentioned you had some materials, so there's an opportunity for a references section. These are a few little notes that I was carrying from last week. So, and I think that some of those are covered in the update. So here's the table of contents.
Can you back up just a little bit for a moment?
Sure. Yeah.
Just go up a little tiny bit, a little more there. Objective.
Yeah. So these were examples.
Oh, okay. All right. Great. Thank you.
Of possible metrics that we could, or metric recommendations that we could make. I think we discussed this before, but this abstract page is really more of a version control thing. It just is a place for me to quickly keep track of things that.
Yeah, no, I do that all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a section of things that need to be addressed.
Right. And, probably be replaced by some kind of brief wording. And so the table of contents came together in this way. It has some slightly wonky formatting, but hopefully we'll get that done. Preface again, the focus areas, which is just carrying forward what we defined back in September, and as a way of sort of guiding ourselves. Executive summary and overview runs about 6 pages. Current state of fiber runs about 7 more pages. Finances is really just a page of notes at this point. I thought that the things that should end up in the finance section might look something like the operating structure. I wrote some words about that, historical performance, recent financial and performance. And we've discussed several times the growth investment analysis and capital investment analysis, and we can touch on those. And
yeah, that's fine. I can
recommendations.
I can lay my stuff into that structure easily.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted some headings in there.
Yeah. No, thank you.
I struggled a little bit with formatting in the next 2 sections, so and I didn't want to waste too much time trying to get that right, but that's why it looks a little strange, but service growth is a section that Gordon's been working on. And that's been revised this week and streamlined, I think.
I'm gonna have to step away for just a minute.
Okay. Recommendations is the recommendations document that we started looking at several weeks ago. I thought it made sense for the table of contents to highlight the recommendations at some level of detail so that people would know where to find ideas, assuming that people will look in the table of contents and decide where they want to read.
I think that's a good idea. It might be helpful to indent, you know.
Yeah, some of that I
So-
think is just the choice I made about how the table of contents is supposed to look.
Okay.
Let me see. I think I picked this one, contemporary. I think if I don't, this is super dangerous.
Oh yeah, contemporary like is the opposite of traditional.
Doesn't
I'm
indent
sort
it.
of traditional.
Here we go. So that's
So,
what it
yeah.
looks like if it's magically converged to traditional.
Oh wow.
Maybe that's better. Sort of. I don't understand the
Yeah, I don't know why they write justify it like that, but
justification, whatever, but it's kind of better.
there's a little more, it's a little easier on the eye, yes.
A little easier.
Yeah.
Not there yet, though, to be fair. And then oops. No, does anybody know the magic keystroke on a Mac to go back to the beginning of a document in Word?
Space bar.
Space
back.
bar?
Go back up top.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Yeah,
It just hits the space bar.
really. I would think that would put a space in the document, but okay. I'm dragging. Anyway, the risk of tapping on any of these things is you go directly to it.
Oh yeah.
Recommendations, so I need to be careful where my mouse is. These
Mark, I think it's a function up arrow.
function up arrow. I might try that. So I found myself going back and forth from top to bottom. Anyway, there's three sort of standalone recs that we've talked about. The request for ARPA reimbursement, as discussed last week. The multi-dwelling unit, third-party last mile enablement, that's what I called what you've written, David. And the broadband capital program, which we had omitted in last week's draft, has found its way in here. Members of the task force, reference links and material. I thought that there would be two things in reference links and material. Basically, the links that we've been working on that are on our webpage and have been carried forward in our agenda, as well as this document that Gail got sourced from the light plant about the conduit requirements are useful, I think, to, potentially to be contrasted with the Ditch Witch information when that makes it in there. Okay, so that's kind of what that looks like. That's an overview. Any comments on the overview or organization before we dive into sections? Okay. So I don't think preface has really changed. I read through it. Does anybody have any particular comments or call outs they want to do on what's in the preface section? I noticed that there's a couple of X% sort of statistics that need a little tweaking. Okay. I'm going to keep moving now. Definition of focus areas. We're not going to touch this because I view that as sort of inclusion of a historical document. So the executive summary and overview, and my goal in this is to try to articulate what we're really saying about all of this, so that if somebody was to pick up this document and only read through to page 10 or something like that, they would have a pretty good idea of the gist of where we came from. So the idea here, and I'll find a way to highlight this better, was a wee bit of history, some conclusions, sort of the benefits of the fiber network as that was constructed are significant. Gail, I know you gave me some feedback on this, and I have not incorporated that in this bill. So
Yeah, one of the suggestions was some subheadings, so that's kind of what you're talking about now.
right, yeah, I didn't highlight it, but yeah, I was thinking maybe I'll do that right. So
Yeah, I
maybe
called that
just-
section benefits.
yeah. And I didn't know if I wanted those things to turn up in the table of contents, but
Oh, right, yeah.
Maybe even just bolding
Oh,
out.
that's a good idea. Yeah, just bold like the whatever, the intro sentence or the topic
Right.
sentence.
Yeah, and that's the
That's an
idea.
idea.
Let's try and, again, I was, so. And I'll send out competing. Made up a word there. Okay, so, and sing out if there's something that you want to say about any of these points. So if I'm kind of assuming familiarity, unless,
I had sort of an overall comment that something that I was thinking about as I was reading this. So
Mhm.
sometimes we talk about broadband and other places we talk about the fiber network.
Mhm,
And obviously when you're talking about subscription, you got to be talking about broadband. But I thought that there might be an opportunity to kind of lay that out a little bit more, or to differentiate, because there are reasons to do universal access to fiber that have not so much to do with the broadband service, so I don't know if anyone else had noticed that or had thought about that sort of dichotomy, like, how do we
I think
talk
that's,
about that?
I think that's an important distinction to make. I think it belongs in the state of fiber section,
Okay,
just because we could go on that little, on that tutorial in
Yeah.
this section, but it would, it gets a little wonky.
okay,
And I think that similar to the decision that we made last week to never call it a utility,
yeah,
if that means something specific, and only call it a service, I think we should be rigorous about talking about the broadband service and the fiber network as two distinctly different things that mean different things. But I
mhm.
do agree that we should spell that out exactly what we mean
Yeah, I
by.
think that's a great point, Gail.
Do
And
you
the
want to,
first example that comes to my mind is, I think, probably the motivation that kind of launched this whole venture is the idea that why can't we do the metering
Right, yeah, I mean,
fiber? That's not broadband. That's communication.
right.
Yeah.
you want a definition section somewhere or?
We talked about that. It hasn't appeared yet, but there may be some value in building something along those lines. Because I do think that, yes, it's important to put a stake in the ground about both what are the, sort of accurate ways to talk about this and what we mean specifically when we use these particular words. Okay.
Mark, before you scroll, just there's a grammatical, I'm not sure if you're not wanting those corrections or not.
Sure, where is it?
In these cases, the services are essential, not the service, I think. See where the R is underlined? Top of the page.
Top of the page.
In examples of
Oh, yeah.
utility
Oh,
It should be the services, yeah.
services are essential.
that's probably why it's complaining about the R, A.
Correct.
I was
Yeah,
looking for the letter when you said that.
right.
Sometimes
Could
I
I
should.
also, just sort of extending the comment I made before and on what Gail was saying, we've been told when opponents of wireless AMI metering have said, well, why can't you just transmit this data over existing communication services such as broadband, such as Comcast's? The answer comes back that there's regulatory requirements for the medium, the communication medium, to be, quote, utility grade. And what we're implementing here, I assume, is utility grade, right? It's got to be. So that is something that I don't think that we've really mentioned anywhere in the document, that we're building out something that actually is unrivaled in town.
Mhm. Yeah, that, I think that's, by which you really mean that the fiber network has capacity and capability that no other network that exists in town actually has.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. I can't recall literally what the definition was that the light plant director talked about as terms of what the communication media characteristics have to be.
Yeah.
But they include, exclusivity. Like it's a dedicated network. It's deterministic. It's
Mhm.
it's not wouldn't get. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'll stop trying to recall exactly what it is, but it would, sounds to me, it would be something that if you could set aside another, what do you call it, a fiber node, fiber mode, right? A sub channel on that fiber
Yeah.
to dedicate to the metering, then that's not a resource that's in contention for anybody else that's using the fiber system. It's dedicated to that purpose.
There, yeah, there are different types of equipment that you can connect to a fiber network. And, some of those types of devices provide guaranteed levels of service and even provide reporting that actually documents that they're providing that committed level of service. That's typically not the equipment that's in use for the residential broadband service, but there's nothing to preclude using that type of equipment on portions of the network where it was appropriate. We just, to my knowledge, don't happen to have any of that right now. But the point's well taken, and sort of as this section. So let's just quickly overview. So there's a comparison of how the broadband service compares to other municipal enterprise services, and we were just in that section. And then an allusion to the notion that there's a need for the community, meaning the citizens in effect, to understand and position it in a competitive environment. And the rationale there is that it was well positioned, certainly when it was developed and deployed initially, but that situation is going to change. And so some of those other providers provisioning possibilities like 5G and low Earth orbit satellite systems are, both, even in the network that Scott was talking about in Washington, their competition is going to be, OneWeb, whatever Amazon is calling their service, and Starlink, because they're not the only game in town anymore, but they may be the only terrestrial game in town. So it's calling out that says other enterprises like the BD Center and the Recreation Department have to look over their shoulders at what the competition is doing and decide what their positioning is. We do too. This section alludes to the digital equity portion too. saying, some of these services that we do, like providing affordable housing units and things like that, or recycling programs, we may do those at an economic loss or whatever because there's a social benefit for doing them. So, what I make some commitments on behalf of the report here. So that's why, if this resonates, this report will describe some of these situations and enumerate recommendations regarding policy. So that's really aimed at what the MDUs are likely to do. So I mentioned the unintended consequence of bypassing MDUs.
So
And-
Mark, could you stop right there, that paragraph where you just highlighted the first sentence? I thought it would be a good place to add a sentence here that, now, like, and I put this in my suggestions that I emailed to you.
Okay.
My sentence says, moreover, okay, so after here you have, let's see, however, there is no reason to expect that they would create significant burdens if such programs were prudently implemented. So you're talking about, the broadband network, financing its growth. But
Right.
I suggested, moreover, numerous federal and state grant programs for broadband infrastructure have become available since the pandemic. So I think we need to, throw that in there. We don't have to rely all on Concord. I mean, there's a lot of money out there, and that's why I put that tight timeline on the
Right.
Article 41. There's a municipal grant program that the timeline is in next week.
Yeah.
Carlin noticed that. And there's some federal, I've seen at least one other federal one.
Yeah.
So
And some of that input that you provided actually ended up down in section 6.
okay,
But
I just wanted to put it in the executive
right to
summary because I
point
didn't
it
see
out.
it
You're
anywhere
right
else.
to include it up here too. So I just made a note of that, and
Okay,
I'll come back to that. So thanks for that comment. Okay. And
Jason, Gail, do you need to tell Jason that there's an opportunity that we might miss?
yeah, I mean, I can
He may be listening.
email that to him, Jason. We see
Yeah.
your name here.
I am
So,
listening. yeah.
hi. Yeah, so Carlin Reed had forwarded me just a link to state grants. And there's a window March to sometime next week for state municipal grants for broadband. So I will send that to you just so you know what I'm talking about. If it's something that we could jump in on quickly, that would be nice.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
good, thanks. So, and then, just the observation, we know that and maybe this should say subscriber growth has been slowing. Would be a better way to put that. And, just to call out that it's useful to try to understand why that has occurred.
Uh, Go ahead.
So, and that introduces this notion that we're recommending that at least $240,000 of ARPA reimbursement, lost revenue reimbursement be pursued. And the formal request of that is included in the recommendation section. Then this is kind of, leading towards the sort of big emotional finish here, I think, which is it's going to take some time to do that. And so this is what I really wanted to make sure that we talked about tonight, was the details of the task force recommendation. So I kind of boiled it down to these 4 points, and I guess there's 3 of them. do you guys agree with that? Did I miss something important?
Um, I'm not gonna answer the, did you miss something, but I guess I was surprised at the word near universal access, and especially because we didn't really define universal access.
Yeah.
From the beginning. So I just thought if we're gonna say near universal, we need to kind of spell it out
I
a little bit more.
I prefer universal access, get rid of near, and you can right there if you want to, and it doesn't bother me if it gets repeated throughout the report. Universal access, comma, or parentheses, service to who, where anybody who wants it can get it.
Why does it do that? Gordon, you're the comment master. Why did it take me back to the old comment when I did that?
I don't know.
I don't know either. In the old version of the Word, you highlighted something and said new comment. It would just put a comment based on that thing that you were just.
Because you're using a Mac.
No, because it was assigned by Windows.
Yeah.
It's a
I know.
Microsoft program.
But my
Right,
Microsoft version doesn't do that.
It's a Microsoft
Yeah,
version.
because it was designed by Microsoft.
This is, I will have you know that this is about Microsoft Word. This is Microsoft Word version 16.59. Who knew? And a Office 365 subscription that I pay for.
I use
For
both.
the record.
The record.
No, I agree
There-
with Gordon. I think it's,
There it
I
goes.
think it's okay to say, to nix the near, especially because this is a goal, right? I mean, it's not like a guarantee or like a, it's a goal, so. I think
Okay, good.
it's-
Well, you know what? I'm there. Anybody disagree? Okay. Great. Consider it gone.
Yay.
Okay. So establish a goal of universal access, fund that goal through reinvestment of net income from broadband, measure the progress, adding achievement of the goal to the portfolio of the light board as the representatives of the citizens should be sufficient to, I thought the word ensure was in there somewhere. Ensure success over time. 2, focus on the business performance and growth to ensure that the broadband service continues to be a net contributor to both the new municipal finances and the community's economic vitality. Using metrics to track business performance, modest increases in market activities, and periodic strategic planning should ensure this outcome while enabling completion of the fiber network. And 3,
I only have,
yeah, go ahead.
Nitpick on
well, I mean,
voting. Go ahead, David.
I think modest increases in marketing activities is a little gentle.
Okay,
Modest.
Yeah, I think
a
you
little
could take,
modest.
I noticed you could take out modest as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, and you know what? I think that people are gonna think of marketing as advertising, but I actually think it's broader. It's in diversification of services, broadening the services. It's pretty
Mm.
fundamental. This is a nitpick, but
well-
business performance confused me when I first read it because I was thinking, well, the town of Concord has businesses in them, so are we addressing their performance? So I'd use a more targeted term like, the telecom division or the Concord broadband, which reminds me of kind of just a question I've asked myself a bunch of times when writing this is like, what's the best way to refer to the business? I've heard like there's the enterprise, there's the division, there's telecom, there's broadband. I don't really care, but let's try to standardize on it because anytime you have 2 words for the same thing, people have to think a little harder when they're reading.
Yeah, I'm actually, maybe this is only a historical thing, but there was a telecom coordinator before broadband existed, right?
Yes.
And so at least when I hear telecom, I'm wrapped around the axle with that. Now,
Yeah.
I don't know if that role exists anymore, but there was once that role.
It got wrapped into the, I think, currently open position of telecom director. So it was kind of a role that grew up to be a bigger role. And that reflected the fact that there were some modest telecom services being provided before the broadband business was done.
Right.
The dark fiber leases and support for the school district primarily. Okay. But the general idea here is, make sure that the business is running well. Use the metrics to perform that we allude to do that. Increase marketing activities. I'll fix the words, but increasing marketing activities and periodic strategic planning. And then finally, proactively establish programs to promote the broadband service in multi-dwelling units, small businesses, and town centers. So these are some of the places that have been omitted because, to further economic inclusion and digital equity. So basically come right out and say, we need something proactive. And in this case, I sort of allude to the fact that CMLP through, the Green Your Heat programs and, CARES and all this has done this sort of outreach before to promote its businesses. So I don't see any reason why similar things couldn't be in place. Okay, and then, the two big wrap-up paragraphs. We have a valuable asset and resource. It's been successful. The network has benefited the town without creating a burden on supposed to be scarce public funds. In fact, the project has contributed savings and income. Be easy to let the status quo be and assume success, but that would overlook the real opportunities for the future and omission of the past.
Yeah, and actually, there's scarier way to state it, which is that if we don't, then actually it's riskier. It's risky to let it slide.
Right. Yeah.
And this says that there are opportunities if we can do better. I don't know if you need to say both, but it's not only just opportunity, it's also avoiding risk, which may surprise the reader.
I like
That's a
that.
good point.
I like that idea. So we could add that idea right now. And then this is kind of where I'm positioning or thought we could position. It's the task force hope that this report serves to stimulate a constructive dialogue in the community. We believe that the fiber network, when completed, will offer even more benefits than it does now. By acting deliberately and over time, these goals can be achieved in a fiscally responsible way. Concord already has processes and institutions that can realize these aims. All it was needed was to bring them into focus and establish the goals. Maybe it is, not was.
How about just to take out a bunch of words, what is needed is to bring them into focus and go establish the goals.
Like that.
So I had two comments on this sentence. By acting deliberately and over time, like to me, that sounds like, oh my God, this is going to take forever. I think by acting deliberately and consistently. And so I think that's kind of a theme that, we need like consistency of, goals and goal setting and action. So and that was.
Yeah, it's funny
I
because
had.
one of the thoughts that I came up with was the fact that we're postponing the hard stuff to do the easy stuff. And I feel like as if that's actually going to get internalized by the institution so that the hard stuff actually never, ever actually happens, because there was never a plan to get around to doing it. So that connects a little bit. It's more like determinedly, did I say that right? With determination, right? That you actually need to plan for completion. If you don't plan for it, it's just never going to happen.
Okay.
Embracing these goals, embracing the goal of universe. In fact, why don't you bring universal access back into the final paragraph?
Okay.
The goal of universal access, or attaining the goal of universal access.
And I think there's, so I like the first part of the sentence there, the first sentence, but I think it kind of sells us short a little bit, because you know, we really want the town to act on our recommendations, like in the near term, and not just like start a dialogue. So I had suggested, and again, Mark, this is in my edits to you. You know, so your sentence starts off, it is the task force hope that this report serves to stimulate a constructive dialogue in the community. And then I would say, and a recognition that now is an advantageous or even critical time to act, because there's so much funding, possible funding that's out there, like millions of dollars, and that could make a huge impact on, you know, the goal of universal access. So I just think it's
Okay.
important to emphasize that now is a really critical time. If this is our goal, we have a, you know, possibly once in a lifetime opportunity to, you know, make a huge dent in the work.
Great.
But instead of stimulate constructive dialogue, stimulate action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Great. Look for a new and improved version of this with that feedback. Okay. So is there anything missing? And maybe we can always come back to thoughts about what's missing, but this is, you know, I think it's a good, we're at a good starting place. Again, we got a couple more bites at the sample, but I thought that I was, again, trying to make it relatively simple. I think if somebody consumed these couple of pages, they'd have a pretty good idea of what we're talking about. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be kind of interesting if we could shoehorn in some of the ideas that Scott just brought in from Washington, which you know, that $3,600, that if half the people at Concord Green subscribe, that would generate almost $400,000. You
Right.
could do a lot of you know, buried conduit with that. So, and what was the other idea that they had that I thought was, oh, the fiber neighborhoods. I don't know if that's in our document.
Yeah, some of those are marketing, some of those are marketing ideas. I'm going to sort of briefly skip over this section on the state of fiber, because we did look at that last week, and I probably should have gone to the table of content. What I really want to know is how to get to the table of contents.
You can, if you go to view, click view up in the header up there, and then click on navigation pane. That just now down a little bit, down. Yep, there. Okay, click that. That should bring you, now click there. Yep. That is the table of contents. It should let you navigate.
All right, cool. So I was going to jump to that. It does let me navigate. So beautiful. So this, because you guys may not have gotten a chance to eyeball this, and this is where, Scott, you and I need to probably sit down and build. But so the operating structure, just in bullet points, was I tried to wanted to see what fit in here, because I felt like some of these missing pieces that have been mentioned need to be in here. Try not to repeat ourselves all over the place. but the, so something about the structure and the current and the, the current state, the successful startup and repayment of startup expenses, including alluding to how most of the debt has been retired, taking, look at whatever we wanted to say about the financial model that we reviewed early in our processes. Talk about the pandemic impact on subscriber growth and ARPA that we've talked about in the last couple of times. Talk about the value of a subscription that we also talked about in the last time, and we just looked at, it's at least $10,000 in revenue for a few years for every subscriber you get, not to mention some, a scheme like, or a structure like the one Scott was talking about, where you actually charge people more for installation than we do today. So that's the illusion. Historically, our cost of acquiring a customer has been less than $2,000. And that was kind of what we were willing to spend. Occasionally we spend more, but we sort of operated with that mindset. And I think the consensus is that that's limiting us. And by, relaxing that constraint and saying, hey, we're willing to invest more to get these customers, that's a way to think about it.
Yeah, and that is actually the one that decouples from the growth wheel, because we can say, if we put the fiber in and we presume it will stay in the revenue generating state once it's installed, which may be a reasonable assumption. In other words, even if the house is sold, and I'm sure, I think there used to be the statistic in California that a house was on the average sold every 7 years. I guess Concord's higher than that, but I don't know what it is. That there is, once that's installed, then there is that stream that we can begin to sort of think of the net present value of that and the capital value of it. And those two things support the notion that that number, can be substantially larger.
Yeah.
And also, if we do that $3,600 thing that Washington State does, then that also changes the calculation about the value of a customer a lot. It could create new resources that are needed specifically for the hard cases.
Yeah, there is one other thing that and this is actually maybe it's to be self-aware, I would put it in here, which is one thing that always makes me think, maybe because I've had my own businesses and I've had to worry about cash flow as things go up and down, which is, let's say that it did turn out that the decreased install rate that we've been experiencing was in fact the leveling of the curve.
Mm-hmm.
And we've gone out and hired a number of people that are now loyal town employees and have an expectation of a longer term employment here. But if there's no installs, what do they do?
Mm-hmm.
And that's always something that's always, frankly, that's one of the reasons I'm personally in favor of a hybrid mix of contractors and permanent employees, because then the contractors are pretty easy to make them go away.
Yeah. So
Well, that's also where you could expand the territory, perhaps.
yeah. Well, so here in this growth of investments, the driver of growth is, marketing and sales in this area, right? This is sell to the past, meaning, the premises that were already potentially subscribers.
Well, you know what? I think the table we got from Matt would actually had that, because one of the things I realized in looking at the table is you summed the capitalized cost and it was 1,900 and some odd installations, but we only have 1,500 and some active customers, which means some number of those more recent installs were in fact a new customer in an existing installation.
Right.
And that's why the cost went, I think that's probably why the cost per install went down, because some of those customers their install might have been nearly zero cost because it was already there.
Yeah, because then that's what's going to happen is, that one-time investment of putting fiber into a premise lasts 20 years. And if that premise turns over every 10 years or every 7 years, you're going to get very low cost installs.
Exactly. That's my point. Yeah.
Yeah. So the second section where the differentiation here is by the capital investment, and the investment specifically in completing the fiber network is an opportunity to expand the number of premises that can be served. And so, the expansion of the network is an increase of passings, which can be modeled on the return can be modeled in terms of how many premises are passed, what's the, and you can call it assumed take rate, and the lifetime subscriber value. So if a subscriber is worth $10,000 and you get 30% of the, or 25% of every premise that you pass. So if you pass 4 more premises, you can assume that's worth $10,000. Can you do it for that? And that's the return on fiber expansion over time. And I have this comment, show the work, says, I think it behooves us to show that work.
One thing that jumped out at me the last time we discussed these kinds of relationships, these equations, was how important it was to keep people from quitting. And when there's a move out, there's a high risk of that, and that messes up our numbers a lot. Right. So it's funny, we're talking about marketing opportunities, and maybe what I'm talking about is marketing, but it's like, hey, is there somebody whose role it is to know when someone's moved out, when a subscriber's left? And there are ways for the town to know that, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then to react and make sure that who moves in signs up.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that this is not a role that exists right now, but it's good to think about funding it eventually, maybe sooner rather than later, to preserve that piece of our financial model.
Yes.
Let me just ask a quick question rather. When I moved from Lowell Road to Concord Green and called Comcast to disconnect Lowell Road, the first question they asked me was, where can we reinstall your service?
Right.
Exactly.
So do we do that at CMLP when there's a Concord to Concord move?
I think that
I'm
charitably,
sorry?
I'd say we struggle to do that.
Okay, all right. Just, that's a part of the marketing.
There's no, electricity is something that people tend to buy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, who's moving out and who's moving in, because if it's not the first thing they do after they unlock the door, it's just, it might be the second.
Pretty close, right?
Because the water department and the electric department always know that.
Right.
And the question is, does that get shared? So anyway,
I'd be happy if just somewhere in the report it said, retention, particularly during moves.
Right.
And if we can just quickly go back to this $3,600 charge, amortized over, I forget how many years.
Yeah.
12.
Sorry, go ahead.
12
Scott.
years.
12. So.
Yeah. And by the way, I don't want you to assume that it was that simple. They had some interesting formulas at how it stopped and start if someone in between moved out. And I don't have my notes in front of me. I apologize, but
Okay,
it's good enough for the moment to talk about it in that
Yeah,
regard.
because I don't have much time, but I mean, again, as a person who's, if you want to compare Comcast to that alternative, you'd have to be an idiot to choose the amortization of $3,600 compared to a Comcast install. Right. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no rational comparison to saying Comcast will install it for X, let's say 150, just as a number, compared to 3,600. Where's the value of that investment?
Well, I could I could flip it around and say, hey, how about if we had a pricing scheme that actually is longevity, gives a longevity discount?
Mhm.
Well, they don't. But from what Scott described.
I know, but I'm just saying we could implement it as a
So-
longevity discount.
So let me be clear about one thing. So we talked about this fiberhoods concept that they had.
Yeah.
That was a way to sidestep the $25. So if they got enough people in a small enough area, I believe they sidestepped that.
Okay.
So
All
this was allow an early adopter who wanted to spend money to get it, or someone that was far out that couldn't build a fiber hood, if you will. They could take on this commitment, and it was small enough. They considered to be small enough, and they were actually very proud of their low cost delivery, because they believe that in the end, with their ISPs, they could deliver content and the broadband for $40 a month to low cost customers. And that was only because they discounted their rate and they asked the ISP to take the same discount. And it was only a modest discount, $20 or $30, that brought the total to the end user down to that $40 range. And
Sorry, Scott, I didn't mean
so there
to-
were a lot of subtleties to the model, and I just wanted to I think the key point I was trying to get across when I described it was they use a much longer period of time relative to that improvement that they're putting in. And so that it allows them to use a much higher number to absorb the cost of that last whatever distance that is.
Okay.
And so, and instead of $1,500, it's more like $3,800.
Okay. Thank you.
That solution might be an interesting solution for those people that find themselves in this particular condition where they need underground conduit installed, which we sort of recognize as an extra. The way we sidestepped this originally was by having a flat install fee, a declining early termination that you never paid if you stuck around for 2 years, and essentially baking our, which is why we ended up with a fairly conservative $2,000, but that it's baked into the subscription cost. So the customer never sees it. That cost is lower than a comparable offering from other services. So they happily pay it. So that was how we kind of addressed that solution.
Okay.
But, for the additional cost of running conduit or something like that, some kind of payment plan might be a very good way to do it.
Yeah, we're not going to figure all this out. And we've got great people in Concord that can carry this forward for us.
Okay. I'm just noticing the time. So we're at 8:20. So I think we've covered some important elements of this, but I don't want to skip over or fail to cover more if we need to. So I'm going to kind of open it up for an opportunity for people to direct me to go to a certain area that you thought needed work or maybe needs some additional focus in this meeting, kind of on the way to wrapping up for tonight, and maybe having a brief discussion about next steps after that. So does anybody have anything in particular they want to look at?
No, I sent you an edit, Mark, just when I'm sure you got it. They were numerical edits.
Yeah, I did see a little of that.
Okay, it was minor.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any other sections that we desperately need to look at? I think
what-
that, yes.
But where, could you jump to the funding discussion?
Oh, the multiple sources of funding?
Yeah,
So I pretty much lifted things from your email for this.
okay,
But
Okay.
it was right, it's the exact next page from where we were. The capital investment analysis, and then this thing, which probably,
Okay.
might wanna, you know what, let's do this. I've learned this trick. There it is. It's now part of the table of contents.
Thank you. Yeah, I
Okay.
hadn't located it, so.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So, and again, this can use some more wordsmithing. I'm happy to sit down with Scott, and I think the expectation should be that a new and improved version of the finances section is going to be forthcoming over the next couple of days. So please weigh in on that.
I'll send it as a separate section, so it'll be a little faster to digest, and you should be able to copy paste it in. It'll be based on your outline.
Great. Yeah, I included the Word document when I distribute this as a PDF to everybody. And as soon as we close this meeting, I will mark this as draft 3 merge reviewed, so that you'll get these edits as well. And what I've been doing is I've been using, to the greatest extent possible, the exact files that you guys have been sending me, and sort of inserting them one after the other in the document in order to build it. So I'm happy to repeat that process one more time. I've been doing very minimal, very minimal things, mostly just, sort of highlighting this, like I think 7 is service growth. So I, made that a heading so that it would just show up in the table of contents. Yeah, and this is the section Gordon worked on. Okay. Great. Further comments, questions? Should we talk about next steps? Okay, let's talk about next steps. So I will plan to try to make this into a final another document. Figure that end of day tomorrow, midday Saturday, I will send a version out and give you guys 24 hours to find mistakes and errors, and then let's target that for sort of noon Saturday.
So is it both end of day tomorrow and noon Saturday, or both just noon Saturday?
Let's say noon Saturday. So we'll do it. It takes me a couple hours to build this. I think now that I've done it twice, I should get faster. Because I think that the tricky thing this was ordering it. I ended up breaking some documents out to multiple pieces. Oh, I did want to, let me just go back to share for a sec. So policies, recommendations, blah. So those are all our metrics is defined and so forth, and some items on governance. And so this is what the members section that Gordon introduced. So this is what it says. So please, at the very least, kind of I tweaked what it said about me a little bit.
That language, by the way, was just from the first meeting that we held. So whatever
Yeah.
you said about yourselves is what ended up there, but I didn't like what I said about, I cut back some of my stuff a lot, so.
Yeah. So there's that. And again, if you feel there's an important document to try to include in this reference link section, what happened to it? Oh, there it is. So there'll be web links and so forth in there. And then this is the conduit, and we can insert anything else that we need to. Scott, I think it'd be interesting to compare these requirements, 24 inches and 1.5 inch electric PVC, Is that-
Yeah, I actually have the very specifics for our friends in Washington about how deep they buried it. I got the spec for the cable and the tool that they use and everything. So,
Yeah, I'd love
it's
to
nowhere.
see that, just.
well, like I said, I thought what we might do is I'll just, when I formalize those notes, we just put them in as an attachment. As a
Yeah,
reference.
put
You know,
it
because
right into-
I do think ultimately one mechanism that would be useful, and this could have maybe come into the recommendation section, a detailed recommendation section, is that Concord Broadband should benchmark themselves against other municipalities or organizations that are doing similar things, and to see when there's differences, to understand them, and are those do those create implications for another way to approach the problem for Concord Broadband. I mean, I think that's, you know, we've already spent a fair amount of time tonight talking about, well, they have a different financial model to pay for the cost of it. So that's a perfect example of, we benchmark against someone else, they take a different approach. Should we consider taking a different approach? And that's the beauty of time going by. There are other organizations and municipalities doing the same thing, and we can learn from them.
Yeah.
Good idea. Okay. Any other comments before we sort of wrap? So that idea is on the way to publishing draft 4. We have some wiggle room because that's going to be a public draft, and what happens from there is we get feedback and we get a chance to really say, is this what we really meant to say in the report? And if there are changes, then between that public draft and the final version, we can make some changes, but it will take some focus from each of you on how to.
Let me ask a question. So we assemble this document Saturday noon, you do, and it gets mailed out. Are you looking for feedback on that before Monday, Tuesday, or is the next thing that happens is the meetings that are scheduled for Thursday of that week?
I'd love to get some feedback on Sunday if anybody finds any major errors or problems. So that would be great. I intend to approach I think I need to go to Aaron Stevens unless Jason agrees to help me in order to actually post the draft, the public consumption draft on the webpage so that we can say that it's been published. My commitment to the light board was to get it out there by Tuesday, by the 11th, because they're going to be sort of seeing it for the first time, and they need a couple of days at least to be able to have any idea what it is. And once that's done, I will shift into the mode of this is the bullet points that we'll talk to about it. So I'm planning to do that work on Sunday and Monday so that we have something to share specifically at the light board meeting on the 13th.
Would just, and you probably do this anyway, but go through the tedium of running words, spelling and grammar checks. Because if you don't, when someone opens it up in Word, those will get highlighted as errors. And so it just pulls the eye right to it. And the other thing I do, I'm not a very good editor, but one thing that helps me is to use text to speech. So things that my eye misses, sometimes my ear catches.
Yeah.
But all of that is, for the last swipe, it's not worth, you don't want to have to do that, every, a lot, but before you send something out to the board.
That's really the goal, is to try to make sure that the version between Saturday and Sunday, the obvious and annoying mechanical problems are solved before it becomes a PDF that then goes out into the world. Because this will be the first opportunity for anybody other than the 5 of us to actually read the document.
Okay, what I captured, just so you know, is assembly on Saturday noon. Comments requested from the team on Sunday, if possible. Mark likely will talk to Aaron on Monday about how to publish it on the website. You'll send it to the light board by Tuesday the 11th, and then the light board meeting and the public comment meeting was on the 13th.
Yeah, I'll also update the agenda for the public meeting on the 14th.
Oh, sorry, April 14th, yeah.
Yeah, to include the document itself will be available for materials, because that is going to be a hybrid meeting. So we'll, we're in, sustainability mode, so we're not going to print lots of copies of this, but the public will be able to access it online, read it, and, bring their own copy on their device if they feel like killing a tree. That's up to them. But that exact same document will get used kind of all week next week and build up whatever changes and comments we need from that version. Okay. Good. We can take public comments. The only visitor we have at the moment is Jason. Jason, is there anything you want to say?
There is not right now. Thank you, though.
Okay, great. Thanks. So hearing no public comments, our stalwart public attendees are not here. I'd be happy to take a motion to adjourn at 8:33.
I'll motion to adjourn, and if Gail's second, then I don't have to do that much typing.
I'll second it.
All right. All right. On a roll call vote, Gordon,
Aye.
Scott,
Aye.
David,
Aye.
Gail,
Aye.
myself, aye. Thank you, guys. This is, I'm feeling pretty good about how this comes together.
Thank you.
Appreciate all your work on it.
Thanks. Thanks, Mark.